Hello, my 3D animation and visual effects friends. Today what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into utilizing our animation blueprint that we created in the last video. From our animation, if we look, we're going to go into my character and change my animation preset to use animation blueprint, and then we're going to search for that blueprint we just created. So we did the my character under animation underscore BP, and you'll see that it makes our animation static again for our character. Let's go in and fix that. My character animation blueprint is what's going to drive all of our animation in this gameplay. So if we go in and open that up, you're going to see our output pose. This is the pose that we're going to use to be able to show what is happening in the animation. If we go into the lower right hand corner, you'll see that I have my assets for my animation there already. And if I drag in my idle and tie to that pose, select compile, we have our animation back. If we were to go back into the game engine, we'll see the animation happening there too. Now if I zoom in, I want to be able to have my animation go from idle to walk and move around the space. So I right click, search blend, and I can find a blend that's going to allow me to move from my idle into the output pose, and also be able to bring in my walk cycle from my assets folder over on the right hand side and have that draw into my output pose too. So now I can bounce from idle to walk. But before we could do that, we need to set the speed of when we can do that. So if I click compile, that will save my idle transgression and movement. And now what we need to do is we need to set up the speed at when we can change from idle to walk. So now if I go into my animation graph, I can go in here, I'm going to select my event blueprint update animation, and I'm going to check and see, is it valid? And if it's valid, we're going to get the pawn ownership and return it as an input object. Now, if it is valid, we're going to go out and we're going to cast to my character. So if I type in cast to my character, I can find cast to my character, and it will cast that my character is valid, the animation that I want to cast is valid, and we can pull in my pawn ownership to the cast to that character. Now what we want to do is we want to set two variables. The first one we want to set is being able to see if our character is falling, and we're going to come to this later on, but this is an important thing to be able to figure out some smooth movements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my character movement, and I'm going to tie that character movement into is falling. Now I got to remember to spell is right, so if I get rid of that one S, there we go, is falling. So I have a function is falling. So is my character falling? If it is falling, what we're going to do is we're going to promote this to a variable and set this variable as is falling. Now this will make a lot more sense in a little bit when we actually do our jumping sequence, but this is a variable that we need to call on to help us figure out where in the cycle of our jump we are at. Now what we can do is we're going to tie in the speed that we need to be able to switch from idle to walk. So to do that, what we're going to start with is we're going to start with as my character, we're going to get velocity. Once we have that velocity, we're going to return a value as to what is the vector length that we're looking at. And then we're going to promote one more variable off the return value here. We're going to promote this to a variable, and we're going to call this speed. So if I drag this up here, go in the upper right hand corner, I go to speed, leave that as a float variable. I could tie those together and things look pretty good. If I want to, I can clean this up a little bit, make it look a little bit sharper, so when I come back to it, I can figure out what's happening here. But as you can see, we have some variables that we created that we're going to call on. I click compile, and you can see that it's already starting to call on those variables. Now if I go into my anagraph and I bring my get speed in, this will get the speed of my character. I can drag that over, and I'm going to apply a float variable to this. So not a float variable, but a float function. And when this function is greater than 0, that speed will change. And if I drag this up here, you'll notice that the output is a Boolean and the input is a float. So what I want to do is change that from a float to a Boolean so it'll communicate a little bit better and drag that in. Now, if you didn't understand anything of what I just said, what pretty much happened is when I hit compile and save here, I now set this so when I press on the button, once I have any pressure above 0, the blend is going to recognize that I want to go from idle, which is 0, to walking, which is any speed higher than 0, as you can see from that float. So what the blend will do is switch from the idle mode to the walk mode by simply pushing forward. And don't forget to save.